All right, so this is where we left off yesterday, fraction, decimal, and percents. And you had some time yesterday to work on this in class. So for those of you that were able to answer, and maybe you didn't get the ones at the bottom, maybe we didn't have enough time for that. But how about the ones on the top? We're missing a decimal for 3/4 or 75%. Natalie, what'd you get for that? 0.75 is correct. So a couple of ways you could get that. You could just do 3 divided by 4 in your calculator. Maybe you already know that's 0.75. Or you could move the decimal from here over 2 times and put it right in front of the 7, because we always move the decimal twice when we're changing percent to decimal. What about the next row? We're missing the reduced fraction. Frank, do you have the reduced fraction for 0.45 or 45%? 9/20 is correct. So to turn a decimal into a fraction, you take the numbers after the decimal point, the 45, and you put it over its place value, which we said yesterday, 2 decimal places means 100. 1 decimal place, 10, 3 decimal places, 1,000, so on and so forth. But this reduces, and it reduces by 5. And Frank, what did you say it was? 9/20. So all of our fractions have to be reduced, 9/20. Lucas, you have the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. 5.1%. Let's turn it into a decimal first.
Okay.
Good. 0.051. The 0 in front of the decimal point, not a big deal. You don't have to write it. The 0 after the decimal point is a must. We have to have that 0. So 0.051. And Lucas, what is that as a reduced fraction? Good job. So again, take the number after the decimal point, 51, and put it over its place value. Now, although we don't have to write the 0 in front of the 5 because nobody says 051, they just say 51, we do have to include the 0 as a decimal place. So there are 3 decimal places, and that's why he said 1,000. That fraction does not reduce. There's not a number that goes into 51 that also goes into 1,000. The next one. 3.6. I'm going to let someone else answer. I'm going to pick someone different each time. So you can volunteer or I can call on you. 3.6. We're going to start by turning it into a percent. Andrea. That's right. Move the decimal 2 spots to the right. So if I'm going decimal to percent, I move to the right. If I'm going percent back to decimal, I move to the left. So 360%. Even though percents are always out of 100, it doesn't mean you can't have over 100%. Some of you score over 100% on your quizzes and tests pretty regularly because you get bonus questions right. So it happens. Now, to turn it into a fraction, this one's actually going to be a mixed number. This one's going to be a mixed number because there's a number in front of the decimal point other than just 0. So if you see a number in front of the decimal point, remember that's just going to go in front of the fraction. It's your whole number. What about 0.6? Hunter, how do I write 0.6 as a fraction? That's right. I put that 6 over its place value. Only 1 decimal place, so I'm putting it over 10. And then Hunter, what could 6/10 reduce to? That's right. Divide by 2 on top, divide by 2 on bottom, and 3 3/5 will be our final answer. So even mixed numbers have to be reduced. How about 1 1/3 as a decimal? Go ahead, Branson. That's right. 1.3 repeating. So the 1 in front of the fraction just goes in front of the decimal. The 1/3, if you do 1 divided by 3 in your calculator, you're going to get an infinite number of 3s after the decimal point. It is 0.3 repeating. So when I turn that into a percent then, and I move the decimal over twice to the right, what number has to go in that empty blank, Alexis?
3.
Yes. So I got 133. Now, it does round to 133%, but I want the most exact answer I can get here. So I put another decimal point and another 3. However, don't erase anything. This answer is right. The big ideas won't take it. What did we just say 0.3 repeating was as a fraction? It was 1/3, wasn't it? It was 1/3. So now that we have another 0.3 repeating, Big Ideas doesn't like repeating decimals, so we're going to erase that. We're going to erase the decimal. We're just going to write it as a mixed number, 133 1/3%. I'll accept either answer. Big Ideas only takes this one here. And I'm pretty sure there's one like that, either on 6.1 homework, or maybe it's on the chapter 6 opener today. Last one, 8%. Maddox, how do I write 8% as a decimal? 0.8. Now, if you write it as 0.8, that means you're only moving the decimal one spot. How many times are you supposed to move it? Twice. That's right, 0.08. Now, the 0 that he said at first isn't necessary. You don't have to say that if you don't want to. A lot of you are, that I usually do. But we at least need to say 0.08, 0.08. That's right. And then as a fraction, take the number after the decimal point and write it over its place value. What place value is that 0.08 sitting in? Addison? Not the tenths, there's the hundredths. There we go. Yeah, it's going to be actually out of 100 here. And again, it's not that it's just one digit. It's the fact that it takes two places. And that's why we have to put it over 100. And then it's going to reduce. Maddie Yentez, what can I reduce 8 100ths by?
You can divide it by 2 or by 4.
That's correct. So since you said it can be divided by 4, why don't we do the biggest one? Save us some time and some space on here. And Maddie, what do you get as your reduced fraction then?
2 over 25.
That's right, 2 over 25. Now, she said you could have divided by 2. That's correct. That would have given you 4 over 50. You just would have had to divide by 2 again to get your 2 over 25. Okay. Next question. On a math test, you get 92 out of a possible 100 points. Select all the possible ways of expressing 92 out of 100. Why don't we start with the easy one? Lucas, what's the easiest one to figure out what 92 over 100 is? 92%. Percents literally mean out of 100. So 92%. What's another easy one, Frank? 0.92, because that's obviously what 92% is as a decimal, is 0.92. Now, for A and C, we have two fractions. Both of them are reduced. That means they're different. So they can't both be right. I need to know which one would give me 92 out of 100 or 92%. So to do that, I'll grab my trusty calculator and I would turn them both into decimals because Frank just told us it's 0.92. So I need to know which of these is going to give us 0.92. Is it 23 divided by 25 or is it 17 divided by 20? What do you think, Caden? That's right. 23 divided by 25 gives you 0.92. What does 17 divided by 20 give you, Frank? 85, 0.85. So it gives you a decimal. It's just not the one we're looking for. And so that's the incorrect one. So if you got a test score back or a quiz and it said 23 out of 25, that means a 92%. Do you have a teacher that actually writes on your test scores? Do you have any teachers that write like 23 out of 25? I don't. Now, on your quizzes, all of your math quizzes are out of 10. So I could put 8 out of 10, 6 out of 10. I usually just put a 6 or an 8 or a 9 or a 10, right? Because they're all out of 10. But I know for like, I don't know if maybe Mr. Sylvester for his math quizzes does that, or where he puts like 49 out of 50 or no. Does he write the percent on there? Okay. Okay. So if you ever get a quiz or test back from a teacher where they just say, hey, you scored 23 out of 25, if you want to know what that is as a percent, turn it into a decimal, just like we did yesterday, and slide it over 2 spots. So that would be a 92%. Then you know, okay, that's an A, right? Anything in the 90s is an A, 80s is a B, 70s is a C, 60s is a D. Anything 59 or lower would be failing. All right, we have one more question. It says the figure shows the portions of ultraviolet UV rays reflected by 4 different surfaces. How many times more UV rays are reflected by water than by sea foam? Lucas, you have a question? Okay, I'm not ready for an answer yet. Now, if you look here at the 4 different surfaces, it tells us what portion of the sunlight is reflected, and it gives us percents, fractions, and decimals. Why don't we just write them all as percents, because they're the easiest ones to compare. Grass reflects 3% of sunlight. What percentage gets absorbed by the grass then? 97%. That's because grass is a plant and it has chlorophyll, and those chlorophyll absorb those ultraviolet rays and turns it into energy or food for the grass. Okay. So grass is going to turn that sunlight into energy, and that's what's going to help it grow. Now, even though it absorbs all that, Maddie, you sit behind Thomas. Okay. Even though it absorbs all that sunlight, when you walk on grass, does your feet burn? No, it absorbs it, turns it into energy. Now, have you ever walked on sand before and your feet burn? Yeah, sand actually reflects 15% is what that would be, which means it absorbs 85%, but instead of turning it into energy, it just literally heats the sand up. So even though the grass absorbs more sunlight than what the sand doesn't do anything with it other than just get really hot. So that's why it's harder to walk on sand than it is grass in the sunlight. Seafoam reflects 25%. So it absorbs 75%. If you walk into the ocean, the warmest water is going to be right as you walk right in, right? It absorbs a lot of that, the seafoam does. What about 21 over 25? Sierra, what would 21 over 25 be as a percent? 0.84, and what would 0.84 be as a percent then? Just slide that decimal over twice. 84%. So the water reflects the most, which means it's absorbing just a little bit, which is why when you go into deep water, it's much colder than the shallow water. And when you're in the water, you're actually more susceptible to getting burned in your face, because the water, maybe you've been hanging out in the pool, right? And you're like, I don't remember staring up directly at the sun. How did my forehead get burnt? Or how did my, my chin get burnt or whatever? It's because the sunlight's reflecting off the water's surface up onto your face. 84% of the sunlight's being reflected up. Okay. That's why, even though you're like, Mom, I'm going to be in the pool, don't worry about putting sunscreen on. Well, yeah, any part that's not in the water is actually going to protect you from a lot of that sunlight, but it's going to reflect it up to the part that's not in the water, which is usually your face. So you're more likely to get burnt in the face when you're at the pool. Now, the question actually said, how many times larger or how many times more UV rays are being reflected by the water than by the seafoam? Some of you saw this question on your homework last night, where it said, how many times larger is this than that? When you see a question that says how many times larger, that means you're going to divide. And that means you're dividing. Like, how many times larger is 24 than 6? Well, 6 times 4 gives you 24. So it's 4 times larger. And so you're just dividing to get that answer. Yeah, Frank? What do you got here? So we're dividing the water by the seafoam, right? So what's 84 divided by 25? So 3.36 times more UV rays. The water is absorbing 3.36 times more UV rays than the seafoam is. Or did I say absorbing? Reflecting is what I meant to say. I'm not sure what I said. It's reflecting more. Grass absorbs the most, reflects the least. Water reflects the most and absorbs the least amount. Okay, we are officially done with our 6.1 notes. We don't have any notes for today because today's homework is just more review. All week long, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're just doing fraction, decimal, percent conversions. Okay. So for those of you not finished with 6.1, work on that for the rest of the period. If you finish it, do what everybody else is going to be working on, who is done, start your chapter 6 opener. Your chapter 6 opener, by the way, I just had it pulled up on here, is 16 questions, and they're all the same. The first 8 are going to have you take a percent and turn it into a reduced fraction. I'll be honest with you, these are the ones that are going to take the most time, because how do you have to write your fractions? Simplest form. Yeah, so reducing the fraction takes a little bit of time, right? Sometimes you don't have to reduce it at all. Sometimes it's already reduced. So the first 8 questions are going to have you write a percent as a reduced fraction. So you probably want to turn it into a decimal first by moving the decimal backwards 2 spots and then write it over its place value. And then starting at number 9, it's going to give you a percent fraction and ask you to write as percent. I think these are the easiest because you turn a fraction to a decimal by doing division and then just slide it over mentally in your head. So you'll actually probably breeze through the last 8 questions because you don't have to reduce fractions. You just have to turn it to a decimal and then a percent. So you are allowed to work in partners like you were yesterday. Just make sure you're working on the same assignment. So if you're done with 6.1, don't work with someone who's not done. Start your chapter 6 opener and work with someone who's working on that. You can also work alone. I'm not going to force you to work with a partner. Aiden. Yes.